Hello and welcome back to my top 10 weekly Shonen Jump anime video series. This is part 2 of 3, so if you haven't already, then pause and go watch part 1 before continuing. For those who have already seen part 1, then continue watching and enjoy the video. Without further ado, let's get started. Number 6. Bakuman. Here at number 6 is yet another series that was illustrated and drawn by Takashi Obata. Takashi has illustrated numerous works in Shonen Jump, and 3 of those were Death Note, Hikaru no Go, and Bakuman. I say illustrated and not created because he is solely an artist, not a writer. For Hikaru no Go, he worked with writer Yumi Hota, and for Death Note and Bakuman, worked with Tsugumi Oba. However, Tsugumi Oba is just a pen name the writer uses for themselves. Their real name, age, height, gender, and everything else has been kept secret for all these years. Now, there's 2 reasons why I mentioned this. First, because I thought it was interesting seeing that 3 series from the same illustrator made it onto the list. Also, because it's not too often that manga series are written and drawn by 2 different people. Usually it's just one very talented person doing both the writing and the drawing. This ties in very well with Bakuman because that's exactly what the series is about. It centers around 2 high school boys who team up and start creating manga for the real weekly Shonen Jump. Here Mashiro works as the illustrator and Tagaki works as the writer. The series focuses on what it's like to be a mangaka and what it's like to work for Shonen Jump. While the 2 of them are happy working at Jump, they still need to deal with the constant struggles of working as weekly mangakas. This includes meeting rough deadlines, trying not to get their series cancelled, and worrying about their personal lives too. But despite their hardships, the 2 of them give it their all and continue to grow as mangakas. Besides Tagaki and Mashiro, there are obviously other authors that work for Jump. One of those being Eiji Nizuma, who's an amazingly talented teenager who created one of the most popular manga series in the show. Shortly after the series starts, Eiji and Mashiro become friends, but most importantly, rivals. Throughout the 75 episodes, Mashiro improves his skills as an artist, however, Eiji always manages to be notably better than him. No matter what Mashiro seems to do, it seems that Eiji is just too talented and stronger as an artist. Similar to Hikaru no Go and Death Note, Bakuman is a non-battle battle series. In a typical shonen battle series, characters physically grow stronger and fight each other with physical attacks. However, in a series like Bakuman, characters battle each other through the use of publishing their works in Shonen Jump magazine. At the end of every issue, Jump includes a questionnaire where readers fill out and submit to Jump themselves. There are numerous questions on them, but there is one that's extremely important, that being the favorite series question. This question asks readers to choose their top 3 favorite series from the issue. This might not seem like much to readers, but it's life or death for authors. Jump collects and counts these ballots to determine what series are popular and which are not. If a series is within the top 10 most popular series, then they'll be fine. But if they're below that and are in the bottom, then they're most likely going to be cancelled. With these weekly rankings, we get to see the current status for each author. Sometimes their series will be at the top of the ratings, be safe around 8th or 9th place, or could be at the very bottom around 18th or 19th place. What makes this system so interesting is that the ratings are constantly changing. They change depending on how good a chapter is done in the most recent issue. For example, Mashiro and Tagaki's first series, Detective Trap, is a detective series which is made up of stories that are usually told within a couple chapters. Because there's a lot of setup and information that needs to be told within the first couple chapters of these arcs, they tend to only do decent in the popularity polls. However, once they release their final chapter for their arcs, they usually see a boost in ratings and jump from around 12th place all the way to 5th or even 4th. There's so much I could talk about with Bakuman, but I want to keep my thoughts somewhat brief. As for the anime, I think it's overall great, although the manga is notably better. The anime looks decent, but the manga looks much more impressive. The first season and even some other areas in the anime are a bit on the slow side and were more polished in the manga. The anime is very faithful to the manga, with the only big change being the exclusion of one arc. While I do like the arc that was cut from the manga, it honestly was one of the weaker ones. I also think the series works better without it, so that is one instant where I'd say the anime made an improvement. But besides that, the anime is mainly great because the source material is great. I would recommend reading the manga since the series is about manga, but the anime is still a solid way to experience the series. Number 5. The Promised Neverland Season 1. At 5th place is The Promised Neverland, or more specifically just the first season. That's because season 2 was much worse than season 1. Seriously, everyone and their mothers seem to despise the series' second season. No matter where I look and who I talk to, I can't find someone saying that they like this season. The reason it's so disliked and hated is because most of the season is anime original. A large majority of it doesn't adapt chapters from the manga, but instead the writers made up their own story. Honestly, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. Don't get me wrong, it's clearly a bad season, but it's not the worst thing ever made. Then again, that's probably due to me seeing way more anime than most people, and because of that, I've seen much worse shows than most people have. Anyway, that's season 2, when this placement on the list is meant for season 1. The Promised Neverland centers around a bunch of orphans at an orphanage, which is in a secluded part of a forest. Here, these kids just live normal lives. They eat meals together, attend classes, play outside, etc. That's what they've been doing, or at least before the end of the first episode. Unfortunately, I cannot go into much details due to spoilers. All I will say is that at the end of episode 1, there's a huge twist which completely changes the main character's perspective of their lives. Because of this, the orphans spend the remaining 11 episodes trying to escape the orphanage. The series turns into a mystery thriller and it's a blast to watch. It was so exciting and entertaining that I ended up watching the entirety of it in one sitting. Similar to the previous series, season 1 of Neverland is mainly great because its source material is so great. Number 4, Dragon Ball Z Kai Season 1. The original Dragon Ball Z was great, but this spot goes to its 2009 re-edit, and more specifically its first season. Dragon Ball Z was a sequel to the ever so popular anime Dragon Ball, which was an adaptation of the ever so popular manga series. The original Z totaled at 291 episodes, which is very long, and it really didn't need to be. This was mainly due to the anime and manga releasing one episode in chapter a week. Your average anime episode usually adapts 2 to 3 manga chapters per episode, however, Dragon Ball Z usually did only one. Towards the end of the original Dragon Ball, the anime was only a couple months behind the manga and only had a handful of chapters to adapt. Because of this, they were then forced to adapt only 1 chapter per episode. The staff had to then stretch out a story that was meant for at most 10 minutes up to 20. This resulted in the anime moving at a snail's pace because very little was being accomplished per episode. Now, despite its pacing clearly being an issue, I never thought it was a huge problem, or at least for the most part. This is still Dragon Ball and there's a ton to love about it. Nonetheless, this issue was fixed for Dragon Ball Z Kai, a cut down and re-edit of the original meant for the anime's 20th anniversary. Kai made some changes such as adding new tracks, tweaked dialogue, and the art being slightly remastered. However, Kai's biggest difference was its length. Season 1 of Kai contains the first 2 of 3 big sagas in the series. In the original Z, its second saga, the Cell Saga, finished at episode 194, whereas in Kai it finished at only episode 97. Cutting down the runtime by half was a huge difference, and it shows a lot. The pacing in Kai may not be perfect, but it's still a big improvement over the original. There are some nitpicks I have, such as the change of some of the actors, as well as the removal of some of the good filler episodes. However, like I said, those are just nitpicks, they aren't a deal breaker. Finally, I should address why the spot is only for season 1 and not 2 as well. Like I said, the first season of Kai contains only the first 2 sagas for whatever reason. Season 2 includes the final saga, the Buu Saga, and totals at 67 episodes, which is notably longer than it should be. That's because this season's pacing is not as quick and polished as the first season's was. This saga took up 92 episodes in Z, and like I said, it's 67 here. Since season 1 cut down the runtime by half, that means this season should have cut another 25 episodes out too. There's a good chunk of footage and scenes that really don't need to be here. Considering the entire point of Kai was to trim out all the filler, this makes the season very disappointing. Not only is the length a problem, but so is the saga itself. The Buu Saga is the last saga in the series, and unfortunately it also happens to be the worst. It's still a good and fun saga on its own, but compared to everything else the series has to offer, it's easily the weakest. This is mainly due to some of the newer characters not being great and likable, as well as the story feeling somewhat repetitive and unoriginal. I still like season 2, but season 1 is by far superior. Number 3, Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho sits at the number 3 spot. The series centers around Yusuke Urameshi, who dies at the end of the first episode, turns into a ghost, and then gets assigned as a spirit detective. Now, despite the title suggests, he does doesn't actually do any detective work, or at least in the anime. That's because the anime cut out all the detective chapters from the manga, and for good reason too. I read the entire manga, and this is one of the rare cases where the anime is actually a lot better than the manga. The manga is just alright, but the anime managed to take every single detail that worked there and turned it into something amazing. The first change the anime made was removing all of the early detective chapters, which weren't that good. They aren't terrible, but they were a drag to read through. They just aren't very interesting, and I'm so glad the series drastically and quickly changed after these chapters. Once these were done, the series then turned into a typical shonen battle series where characters would have cool abilities and beat the crap out of each other. A ton of these battles were both fun and inventive, or at least in the anime they were. Just like the manga in general, the fights are alright, but they're held back by a few things. One of those is the art itself. The art in the manga is very mixed. The creator Yoshihiro Tagashi is a fantastic writer, but I can't say the same for him as an illustrator. The drawings themselves in the manga can look great at times, but they can also look pretty bad too. This is mostly seen towards the end of the manga, since Tagashi was exhausted from creating weekly chapters for years without many breaks. Because of this, the quality of the series suffered dramatically. The character designs I'm not a huge fan of either. Some look pretty good like Yusuke, but others don't look great or appealing. As for the fights, they aren't bad, but they lack the polish and flow that something like Dragon Ball's fights had. There, going from panel to panel felt seamless, and it was always clear what was going on. Here it can be clear, but again, it just lacks polish along with appealing designs. In the anime, the art is leagues better. It's not mind-blowing or anything, but it's night and day compared to the manga, especially for some of the fights. Another reason why these fights are so much better in the anime is because of the anime's pacing. The anime extended some of these fights to a longer length, which is usually seen as a bad thing. However, it's sort of the opposite here. Some of the fights in the manga felt way too short, so it's nice that they got some extended time. As mentioned, the early chapters in the manga were not great, and the same goes for the last chapters, or actually the last arc in general. Unfortunately, the last arc in the series is not so good. It's okay. It mainly suffers from being very short and ends abruptly, since Tagashi wanted the series to end as soon as possible. During this arc, there are a notable amount of fights that happen, and a lot of them are skipped in the manga. In the anime, these fights are completely exclusive, and they're not half bad either. It's amazing how much thought and care was put into the anime, especially since the manga was so flawed. While not a perfect series, I'd say Yu Yu Hakusho was a perfect and fantastic adaptation. Well, that's going to do it for part 2 of this video series. Join me next time where I'll be discussing the top 2 series as well as 2 honorable mentions. Thank you for watching.